And there are those people who are catfish in life, and they keep you on your toes. They keep you guessing, they keep you thinking, they keep you fresh. And I thank God for the catfish, because we'd be droll, boring, and dull if we didn't have somebody nipping at our fin.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. Later on in this episode, we will be live at the Carolina Mudcats ballpark in Zebulon, North Carolina, talking with members of the Curved Brim Media meetup that happened there. After that, I will be speaking with Kelly Robinson, the minor league nerd, about the history of the various franchises that have been the Carolina Mudcats over the years. I'll be joined by Baseball by Design's wildlife correspondent, Ranger Amy Burnett. And of course, Dan Simon will be here with one of his Studio Simon Stumpers. Right now, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to talk about the Carolina Mudcats and the experience that I had interviewing the owner of the team who came up with the nickname Mudcats. I spoke with Steve Bryant almost 10 years ago in February of 2015 for an article in sportslogos.net called The Story Behind the Carolina Mudcats, It's the Fish, Stupid. This is one of my all-time favorite interviews that I have done for sportslogos.net. Again, it was Steve Bryant who purchased the Columbus Astros before the 1989 season. He described a scene that I thought sounded like a cliche from a cheesy movie. He had never seen the team play. He had never been to their ballpark. And what he told me back in 2015, he said, I bought it from 4 doctors in Columbus, Georgia on a Saturday night. They pulled out a fifth of Jack Daniels on the negotiating table. And at the end of the night, I bought a baseball team. And so he was wondering what he had gotten himself into. He said, the first time I went to the ballpark for a game, I actually owned the team. I bought it Saturday night and I went to Sunday's game. This is Columbus, Georgia in the summertime. And so you can imagine that it was pretty hot. He went to the game. It was a 1:00 in the afternoon game. He told me then there were more players on the field warming up than there were fans in the stadium. And he said, what scared me the most was that a foul ball went into the stands and no one went after it. So it's a pretty listless scene. He was wondering what the heck he had done. His background was in advertising. And so he knew that changes needed to be made. The first was that he knew that they would be moving that team from Columbus, Georgia to Raleigh, North Carolina, as soon as their stadium that was ready, the very stadium that you'll be hearing from later on in this episode. And he knew, as we all know, as participants in the fun community that is minor league baseball logos and branding, that naming your team the Astros after your parent club is boring and an offense to opportunity. So he knew that a rebranding was in order. He had a couple of requirements. He wanted it to be unique. He wanted it to have local significance, but he also wanted it to have national appeal. They looked at a couple of names. The Cannons was a reference to the Civil War history. There was another one, could have been an early entry in the minor league baseball food frenzy, the Scrambled Dogs, which is basically hot dogs chopped up into coleslaw with onions, pickles, beans, and oyster crackers, which was developed by local World War II hero Charles Stevens for the Dinglewood Pharmacy more than 50 years ago. The name, of course, that they settled on was the Mudcats. They used that name for their final 2 seasons in Columbus, and they adopted what many folks identify as one of, if not the, early entries in the whole minor league baseball logo craze. Of course, they settled on the name Mudcats. A mudcat, of course, it's a species of catfish. The primary logo that they developed features a catfish swimming through the letter C, which stood for Columbus in 1989 and 1990, and then stood for Carolina ever since. And then they've got a cool wordmark logo that features like catfish whiskers hanging down from the letters D and C and M and S. All of this was created by an artist named Frank Harrod, who was paid $500. Frank Harrod said at the time that $500 was nearly twice his normal rate. So it was not a bad deal for him, even though this became one of the best-selling logos in minor league baseball. For the first 4 or 5 years, they were the #1 team in the country in terms of sales. Obviously, a lesson to the rest of minor league baseball that this was the way to go to develop fun and interesting logos. The logo became something of a nationwide phenomenon. Back then, that was much more unusual. We didn't have social media. The internet was in its early stages, but they were still selling out of hats. They sold out of hats almost immediately in their first season. There was a local newspaper promotion that offered a Mudcats hat with any subscription renewal, and they sold out of 1,000 hats in less than a week when that was unveiled. They started advertising. This is one of my favorite things, and we'll talk about this. They started advertising in publications like Baseball Weekly and Baseball America, and you could order one of these caps by mail without really knowing what it looked like. And then as all this was happening, there was a photo of a kid in a Mudcats cap that was printed in the Atlanta Journal that really brought the team a lot of publicity and really prompted their sales. Since then, of course, there's been a couple iterations of this team. We'll get into the details of the franchise later on in this episode. But this brand started with Steve Bryant asking himself, and this was one of my favorite quotes from that article back in 2015. He said, "When Bill Clinton was running for office the first time, there was a sign in his campaign headquarters that said, 'It's the economy, stupid.'" And so Steve Bryant said that in their office, they had a sign that said, "It's the fish, stupid. You don't screw around with the fish." This franchise is one that's actually going to be moving in the not too distant future. We'll talk about that later on in the episode. And there's some question about whether this team is going to be screwing around with the fish. So we will have to wait and see what happens to this brand in the next couple seasons. The creator of this logo, Frank Harrod, passed away way too early at the age of 63 in 2019. But the enduring legacy that he has left is one of minor league baseball's absolute classic brands, a trendsetter, and a really fun identity that minor league baseball fans know and embrace. It was fun to be there at this ballpark, to get to see this brand in person, to enjoy an actual catfish sandwich that they sold at the ballpark. It's a terrific brand, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. All right, everyone, welcome back. I am here right now with my Curved Brim Media friends, Ed Rivera of the Dad Hat Chronicles and Eric Profit, one half of the Earned Fun Average, along with Johnny Bolin, who isn't here on our Curved Brim Media road trip. We are here right now at the Carolina Mudcats. We are in Zebulon, North Carolina, hanging out, watching the Carolina Mudcats take on the Myrtle Beach Pelicans. It has not been a fast-paced game. And Ranger Amy Burnett and I have a flight to catch, so we're actually rooting for some outs here. This is where the pitch clock might actually work to my favor, but so far, no luck with that. Eric, this is the last year for this ballpark. The team is moving.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come out here so I could see the ballpark. It's a pretty nice ballpark. There's not a whole lot of shade. We did find a spot with shade down below, but if you sit up top, there's no shade whatsoever.
That is special thanks to Kelly of the Minor League Baseball Nerd podcast for researching this, finding us some seats. Ed Rivera, we're here in your hometown, basically. It was, like a half-hour drive to get out here. We've been to the Holly Springs Salamanders. That was a fun game. We went to the Durham Bulls, a classic baseball experience. Yes. We're here in a ballpark that is admittedly dated. This is, you've got a lot of baseball available to you here in North Carolina. This is, what factored into the decision to be here today for this game as part of the Curved Brim trip?
Strictly for the fact that they were leaving. This was the one that was chosen for us to be here because this is the last year, like Eric was saying. And then that's it. That is it.
For me, the fact that it is not that far from the airport factored in.
35 minutes?
Ranger Amy and I are flying out.
And it was a day game.
Oh, it was a day. Right. There's not a lot of day games in North Carolina because it is roughly 150 degrees on the field right now. But we found a breezy spot. Actually feels pretty good right here. My podcast, Baseball by Design, obviously, is about minor league baseball logos and nicknames. This is a classic. This is one of the ones that sort of created the ethos of the wacky minor league baseball logos and nicknames, right? Like, so
the logo is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's again, like you were saying, right? Iconic, classic. You cannot miss it. When you see it, it is the Carolina Mudcats.
Eric, you're a fan of minor league baseball logos and branding. You talk a lot about that on your podcast, The Earned Fun Average. This logo, to me, holds a special place in the sort of history of minor league baseball branding. It's one of the reasons I wanted to come here, actually, was this brand, actually, just because it is such a classic and factors into the history of minor league baseball logos and branding. What's your take on it?
Well, what's funny is that, so when my son Zach, when he was 7, I wasn't, so that was about 8 years ago, I wasn't big into minor league logos and branding. However, the team that he played on was the Mudcats, and they wore the logo, and so it's a logo that I've been familiar with for quite a few years now. But you're right, it's just one that has been around, one of the oldest brands out there, and haven't done really much updates to it, but it is a classic logo for sure.
Do you think it's one that, when the team moves, so often any big change with a team, they will rebrand. Is it one that could withstand branding? This is a question for both of you. Ed, you're nodding.
Well, yeah, because they're known as the Carolina Mudcats. They're not like the North Carolina or the Zebulon Mudcats, right? So I think that was done on purpose. Right?
Yeah.
So like if they were to move to South Carolina, they can still be known as the Carolina Mudcats. So they don't. And besides, like you were just saying, it's classic, it's iconic. So why, if it's not broken, why change it? So.
All right, Eric, what do you think? When they move, do you want to see them have a new brand?
No, it's a good enough brand that I think they should keep it, because but yeah, I agree. It's a good enough logo that they should, and something that you don't see very often around, not mimicking like a tiger or something. So yeah, I think they should just keep it.
So, one of the things about this team, obviously, that we really like, Eric and I in particular are aficionados, fans of the ice cream helmet, and they do a hefty serving here in their ice cream helmet. They've got the classic black with the classic logo on it. Eric, have you gotten a helmet yet, Eric?
I did. That was actually the first thing I got when I came in the doors to the gates. I came straight in. I actually saw the Dippin' Dots stand first and saw that they had a helmet on the little sign for what they were selling, and the Dippin' Dot stand was closed, but then right behind it's the ice cream stand. And we were talking last night in Durham. We weren't sure if they would have the helmets because it's the last year here. But luckily they did have them, and so I was able to get an ice cream helmet. First thing I got today.
All right, a ranking of Dippin' Dots, frozen custard, soft serve, and hard scoop. What's
Ooh. Custard 1, soft serve 2, hard scoop 3, Dippin' Dots 4.
I'm very close to you on that. I would go the frozen custard 1, then the hard scoop, then the soft serve, then the Dippin' Dots.
Soft serve number 1 for me.
Ed with the soft serve at the top of the list.
Serve. Yes.
Ed,
serve.
the Copa de la Diversion program
Correct.
is near and dear to your heart. You have roots in Puerto Rico. You are a fluent Spanish speaker. This is a fun brand.
Yes.
Los Pescados. Am I
Pescados.
right? Pescados.
That's pretty good.
Did I do all right on that
Yeah, you
one?
did. That was a good job.
What's the significance of Pescados?
Fish.
There you go.
You're welcome, America.
All right. They are a Brewers affiliate.
However.
All right, here we go.
Their logo, their brand is really, really, really good.
Yeah.
The design is amazing. The colors are beautiful. So it does stand out. That's one of the very first hats from the Mudcats that I purchased. So that I love it. I mean, granted, it's very close to Mudcats, right? So I have a rule in which if you're going to do an alternate identity, or if you're going to do a Copa, try to do something that's like different, or that it is very hyper local, to use your word that you use. And yeah, okay, but it's a beautiful brand.
It is. The Pescados brand is very good. Eric, I know that you love alternate brands. They are a Brewers affiliate, these here Carolina Mudcats. The microbrews. You're a fan of beer, you're a fan of baseball, you're a fan of minor league baseball, and you're a fan of alternate identities. What do we think about the microbrews brand?
I like the microbrews. The only thing is they're a little leaning too heavy into the Brewers colors with the blue and the yellow, so I wish they would switch the colors up a little bit.
Agreed.
But outside of that, I love the name and love the logo. I collect the little lapel pins, and I got one that has the barrel with the microbrews written on it. So I like the brand itself, but I wish they would change the coloring because it's too much Brewers. And I don't hate the Brewers, but I'm not a big fan of the Brewers.
Right. You're a Kansas City Royals fan. Ed is a Cleveland Guardians fan.
Yes, sir.
I'm a Philadelphia Phillies fan. I saw the microbrews alternate brand, and I liked it. But as a non-Brewers fan, it looked like I was a Brewers fan if I'm buying that. This is the Curved Brim Media meetup here, and we're hanging out back here in the breeze. None other than Pat Larson, host of the Minor League Baseball Pat History Series on Twitter, on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We're talking Pat here. We've been together. We've been hanging out for 3 days at Minor League Baseball. games. We're talking about this here Carolina Mudcats logo. Your thing is hats, right? Like you are picking out, like you've got an enormous collection of hats. You are wearing right now one of the few Curved Brim Media members to be wearing a flat brim cap.
How gross.
With a classic logo in minor league baseball. What's your take on this logo and its place in minor league baseball history?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really great brand, and I agree with you. I think it's a great classic brand. This is the brand that they would have used all the way back when in a previous iteration of the team in Columbus, Georgia, was here with the Columbus Mudcats.
Now, before you get too far into that,
yes,
we have also with us, we have Kelly from the Minor League Baseball Nerd YouTube show and podcast. I'm going to get Kelly to say hi, but Kelly, I'm going to ask, he doesn't know this yet, but I am going to ask him to appear on this episode as well to tell us the history of baseball, of Mudcats baseball, because there is a lot of history, these teams, different ones being called the Mudcats, moving around, a lot of dodging and weaving. Yep. So Kelly, I'm putting you on the spot, on the air right now. Can you come on next segment to do a segment on the history of the Mudcats?
Yes, I certainly can.
Amazing.
I'm not going anywhere.
All right, so stay tuned because the next segment is going to be Kelly talking about the history of the Mudcats here. But Pat, back to you. The place that this logo holds in minor league baseball history is as an aficionado of hats and logos and that sort of thing. What's your take?
Yeah, I love the fact that it's a brand that everyone can go to if they're looking to get started with hats. Essentially, I think it's a really good one to start, one of the good ones to start with. And another place was like the Durham Bulls that we went to, and Carolina Mudcats kind of fits in that classic logos brand. And so I think it's a really, really nice one to have. They've got a nice like red, black and red hat like the one that I'm wearing. I know the listeners can't necessarily see that, but then they also have one that has a white crown and a black brim, and then one that has I don't know the exact shade of red, but a unique shade of red for the Carolina Mudcats. That's a red crown and a black brim. So
it's a beautiful cap, even if it's a style that I would not necessarily choose. Before I let you go, Pat, here, this ballpark as an experience, it's I would describe it as maybe no frills.
Yeah,
I've been enjoying it, maybe because I had low expectations. I'm enjoying my time here.
Well, and I would say the same thing. I heard some negative things before arriving, and then when I've come here, I've been pleasantly surprised.
Yeah,
you're right. It's a no frills ballpark, but it's very basic, and it doesn't
concrete jungle, baby.
Yeah, it doesn't have the usual modern amenities that maybe some people in more modern stadiums are used to, but it still has the great game of baseball, being played here. So I really have no complaints. I've been very pleased with my visit.
There you go. Me too. I've been enjoying it. I'm just sorry I'm going to have to leave early because Ranger Amy and I have a flight that we've got to catch. All right, before we end our live from the ballpark segment here, I do want to speak with Lynn, longtime friend of Curved Brim Media and our many platforms. You and I actually have met before during my Baseball Palooza trip. You happened in Wichita, and then in Kansas City at the Monarchs. Absolutely. So you've come a fair distance to be part of the Curved Brim Media meetup here. This is something we just put out on Twitter. It's come one, come all. Let's have a good time. Let's hang out. What's the motivation for you to come hang out with the Curved Brim Media meetup?
Oh, there's plenty of people here that I've never met before, so it's nice to actually put a face to a name beyond, a person behind the face of the name. And I've never been to North Carolina besides 3 hours in the Charlotte airport, which didn't impress me.
Oh my gosh!
Whoa,
that bat went flying.
Ding dong! Flying bat. So it's just a fun opportunity to meet some people, visit a state that I've not been at, and visit some cool ballparks, and just have a good time.
You also collect these helmets. What do you think of the Mudcats logo on a helmet?
I like it. It's a nice traditional, like as you say, the wacky. It's the first iteration of those, not just tigers and bears and cats. Oh my!
Yeah.
But I like it. I think it will hopefully stand the test of time, and it's fun. Living near the Mississippi River, I dig it.
There you go. That's perfect.
Big muddy.
All right, Lynn, thanks very much. All right, everyone, stay tuned. On the next segment, we're going to be talking with Kelly of the Minor League Baseball Nerd podcast and YouTube show about the history of this team. All right, everyone, welcome back. What a pleasure it is for me to have on the podcast for the very first time the newest member of Curved Brim Media, Kelly Robinson, who is the co-host, along with his wife, Christina, of the Minor League Nerd, which is a YouTube show and a podcast. You've heard it advertised at the end of this podcast. Kelly, Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Paul?
Well, I'm doing fine, but that's because I've adjusted to life in the fast lane, the fame and fortune of being a member of Curved Brim Media. That's all new to you. So how are you adjusting to the glitterati life of Curved Brim Media membership?
I'm taking it in stride.
Yeah.
I'm kind of I'm a introvert who wants to be an extrovert. So all this attention, can be a bit much at times.
Sure.
But
Sure.
I
Sure.
mean, the nice thing is since we joined in February, we have our fan base on YouTube has grown quite a bit. So definitely enjoying that.
Yeah. And the tabloid photos of you and Christina,
Well,
back page of the New York Post, and
we don't need to get into the rumors. I mean,
you can't even go to the grocery store anymore though without being
no, they're
tailed by
waiting
a
outside
photographer.
my house. It's ridiculous.
The minor league nerd is, the podcast is so much fun for me because you all meet a need of this minor league baseball fandom community, which is to track the history of these teams, not just their successes and their failures, but the paths that they take around the country and sometimes around the continent. Minor league baseball teams notoriously move around the country all the time. They're uprooting, they're transferring, I feel like every team in minor league baseball has at some point in their history been the Portland Beavers. So it is a service, a great service that you're doing with each episode of the Minor League Nerd to track the travels of these teams as they move around the country over the decades and centuries. We are here to talk on this episode about the Carolina Mudcats. The Carolina Mudcats have a twisted history, and in fact, it's more than just one franchise that has been the Carolina Mudcats.
Right.
So, with you and your encyclopedic knowledge and your gigantic spreadsheet, let's start with the original franchise. The existing franchise that is the Carolina Mudcats was not the original Carolina Mudcats. So,
Correct.
what was this original Mudcats franchise, and where are they now?
So the original Mudcats name started in 1989 with the Columbus Mudcats of the Southern League. They started in Columbus, changing their name from one of your favorites, named after their parent club.
Oh boy.
They were the Columbus Astros from 1970 to 1988.
That's Columbus, Georgia.
Columbus, Georgia, yes.
Okay.
And before that, once again, they named after their parent club. They were the Evansville White Sox, as in Evansville, Indiana.
Okay.
Which I still think is quite insane that a Southern League team, all based in like Georgia, Mississippi, the Carolinas, had a team up in Evansville, Indiana, which just seems like a logistic nightmare. But they actually played there for 3 seasons before moving to Columbus and becoming the Columbus White Sox for 1 year. But they can be traced back even further.
Oh.
Can actually be traced back to the original South Atlantic League, which started in 1904,
wow.
Playing off and on until end of 1963. After the 1963 season, the South Atlantic League rechristened and changed its name to the Southern League.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So this team, the original Mudcats team, actually started off as the Savannah White Sox.
And what year was that?
1962.
Okay.
But their last 7 games of their season, they actually moved to Lynchburg and became the Lynchburg White Sox.
Okay.
And the reason they moved to Lynchburg was because nobody was showing up in Savannah, which, as we know, before the Bananas, nobody showed up in Savannah for baseball games.
That's true. Also true of the Sand Gnats, for sure.
Yeah. Yep. So they played 7 games as Lynchburg and then came back in 1963 as the Lynchburg White Sox. And then when the league rechristened, they continued on as the Lynchburg White Sox.
So this is the original franchise that became the Carolina Mudcats.
Correct.
Was back in the 60s. They were in Savannah and Lynchburg. When did they move to Columbus? And were there stops in between?
After they became the Columbus Mudcats, they played there for 2 seasons.
Okay.
Moving to Zebulon,
North
Carolina in 1991, becoming the the original, the original Carolina Mudcats.
So 1989, they changed from the Columbus Astros to the Columbus Mudcats, and then 2 years later moved and became the Carolina Mudcats
Right.
in Zebulon, which is where we went and saw them. The same ballpark? Was that the ballpark?
Yep, same ballpark.
Okay.
Which, as you can tell, looks like was something that opened in the early 90s.
Zebulon, by the way, is the explorer. Zebulon Pike is the explorer that Pikes Peak in Colorado is named for. So that is a little connection to my current home state of Colorado. All right, so they were the Carolina Mudcats as of 1991. But that franchise is not the same franchise that we saw just recently. So what happened in between?
So they relocated. They were bought by Quint Studer,
Yeah.
who also currently owns the Beloit Sky Carp
And the Pensacola Blue Wahoos.
Yeah, yes, and yeah. So he bought the team in like December 2011. So it was a weird kind of shift. So he owned the Pensacola Pelicans of the American Association. So he sold that team to a group from Amarillo, Texas,
Okay.
who then moved that team to Amarillo, where they became the Amarillo Sox. Currently no longer exist. So then Quint bought the Carolina Mudcats, moving them to Pensacola, renaming them the Blue Wahoos, and then turned around and helped the guy who he bought the original Mudcats from to buy the Kinston Indians.
Okay.
And then that guy, he then moved the team from Kinston to Zebulon and rechristened them as the second current Carolina Mudcats.
So I jumped the gun there. I apologize. I did not realize that the original Carolina Mudcats became the Pensacola Blue Wahoos. And so when you said Quint Studer, I was just like, oh, Quint Studer, he owns the Pensacola Blue Wahoos. So the Pensacola Blue Wahoos were the original Carolina Mudcats.
Right.
And they are still happily playing in a beautiful ballpark down there in Pensacola.
Yeah, it really is a great park. It's a great view. And as a fellow pale-skinned ginger, I will let you know they don't have any shade. So don't do a day game like we did.
Okay, very good. Yeah, ginger visuals unite. We got to look out for each other.
Yes, indeed.
All right. So that is the twisted tale, the many stops. What's the total? I didn't tally them as you were going there. What's the total number of cities and nicknames?
So they were Lynchburg White Sox. Sorry. Actually, they were the Savannah White Sox, then the Lynchburg White Sox, then the Evansville White Sox, then the Columbus White Sox, then the Columbus Astros, and then the Columbus Mudcats, and then finally the Carolina Mudcats.
So is that 8? I saw you were counting while you were doing that. That's 8.
I was counting and then I stopped, but yeah, that's 8.
I think that's 8.
I should have kept counting, but I stopped.
So the current franchise that is the Mudcats and is going to be something else in a couple of years. They were in Kinston. What iterations of that team existed before they were the Mudcats?
So they actually started in 1978 as an expansion team, the Carolina League, but the Kinston team wasn't really all that original with their names. They originally were the Kinston Eagles,
okay.
Go Birds,
yeah.
For 4 years. They played as the Kinston Blue Jays for 4 years, went back to the Eagles for 1, and then in 1987 became the Kinston Indians, playing under that name until they became the current Carolina Mudcats in 2012.
And was there a gap between the team that is now Pensacola and the team that moved to Carolina, to Zebulon, to become the Mudcats, that Kinston team that moved to Carolina? Was there a gap?
There was no gap. That the transactions all took place December 2011, maybe into January 2012.
Okay.
So Kinston, who was in the Carolina League, then relocated to 5 County Stadium in 2012. So they went from what it was a AA down to, at that point, a high A team, and now Carolina League is now a low A.
And it sounds to me, we were saying that this was their last year. It sounds to me like they're going to have one more year in Zebulon before they move. I think they've got one season left after this year.
That's part of the whole reason we went there is because we were all under the impression it was their last season.
Right.
Which sounds like it won't be. And it also sounds like when they move that they're planning on getting rid of the Mudcats name, which just kind of seems insane.
I know, because it's such a terrific logo and it's such a classic story, right? Like it's I mean, it's a really fun one so far as I'm concerned. So it's a shame to see it go. I will be curious to see what happens with this Mudcats team. You know, as we mentioned while we were at the game there, it's not the greatest ballpark ever in the history of the world, but I didn't mind it as much as I thought I was going to. I actually thought it was going to be just like a really like atrocious ballpark experience. I thought it was fine. It was, you know, it was like sort of no frills, but it was I thought it was perfectly nice ballpark. So and we were sitting in the shade and we saw a good game, and so I didn't have a problem with it. If the Mudcats name goes away, I'm gonna be sad about that. It's a
I know.
classic.
Why would you get rid of this classic name? I mean, people have been buying their merch since 1989. Back, you know, as you've mentioned and others have mentioned, it through Baseball America or other publications. And it's like, why would you want to get rid of this name?
Yeah, if they do rebrand, I hope that, you know, there's Catfish Fridays or whatever where they, you know, where they play as the Mudcats and you know, keep that brand alive. But we'll see.
They are owned by the Brewers, so they might not feel the need to keep the name.
Yeah.
Hopefully they don't become the Wilson Brewers. That would be terrible.
Oh my goodness. Can you imagine? Hopefully they don't do something goofy with like a volleyball, right? Like, okay. Well, Kelly, this has been so much fun to finally have you on the podcast. I've been meaning to do this anyway, and so this Mudcats team is the one that I sort of think of first when I think of teams that are. Well, no, I should say I think of the Portland Beavers first when I think of teams, because I think there have been 4 different franchises that have played as the Portland Beavers.
Actually, I think it's 5.
Is it 5?
Yeah.
That may be another episode. We may just have to do a whole episode on the Portland Beavers and the various iterations.
We covered the last Portland Beavers in one of our videos, one of our early videos on the history of the LA Angels, the original LA Angels to the El Paso Chihuahuas. They had a stop in there 2 stops before ending up in El Paso.
I will have to say that when I heard that on that episode, it made me chuckle a little bit because I was just like, yep, they've all been the Portland Beavers at some point.
Yep, pretty much.
We are referencing, of course, the Minor League Nerd YouTube show and podcast. I listen to it on a podcast just because I don't spend a lot of time on YouTube. I listen to the audio version of it, so I'm glad that it's available that way. But I would encourage everyone to check it out. However you consume minor league baseball media, the Minor League Nerd, the service that you were doing and the entertaining way that you tell these stories are just absolutely great. You and Christina do a great job. Where can people find you on social media and online?
So our handle on Twitter is Minor League Nerd. Instagram, it's the Minor League Nerd. And my personal, it's Calibration on Twitter.
Fantastic. I encourage everyone to go do that. And thanks again for joining us on Curved Brim Media. It's been a pleasure to be working alongside you now and to have you all as part of the team.
I'm definitely glad to be a member. Like I said, it was kind of a hope to possibly join, but it's also great being on the podcast.
Well, it's a natural fit, and I love everything that you do with your show and your podcast. So we're glad to have you, Kelly. Thank you so much. This has been fun.
All right, thanks. So I'm hearing the music as we're like ending here, like coming on. It's like playing in my head and like.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I am so pleased, as always, to welcome Baseball by Design's wildlife correspondent, Ranger Amy Burnett, fresh off yet another national anthem performance at the Northern Colorado Owls with a Z and our Fort Collins Foxes. Ranger Amy, hello, how are you doing?
Hello. Well, how come you didn't mention your first pitch?
It was not a great first pitch. Look, let us never speak of that first pitch again.
But you got to throw out the first pitch.
I did. Let's just say I did not bounce it. It did not bounce it, and the catcher caught it. That's what matters. We are talking about the Carolina Mudcats. You and I are fresh off a trip to North Carolina where we got to see a Mudcats game.
We sure did. That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. The catfish sandwich was delicious.
Yes.
A little bit funny. It feels a little bit cannibalistic to be
Eating the
eating
mascot.
the mascot during a game. It's like, go Mudcats, chomp, chomp, chomp. Let's talk about these catfish, though. Catfish are like very cool animals. This is a very endearing logo, I think. People really responded to this when it first came out, and they still really like it. What makes a catfish endearing? Why do people like this logo?
I think people really like catfish because they have whiskers, right? They remind them of cats, and people like animals that look like, fur things or fuzzy things. And fish generally aren't thought of as like cute and cuddly, so they're like, oh, it's like a cat, it has whiskers. So they like catfish. Did
Okay.
you know why? Do you know why catfish have whiskers?
They have
I like
whiskers
your
for feeling.
They do.
Yeah.
And also taste.
Oh,
They live in muddy places a lot of times, so having these whiskers to sort of sense, they're like super senses to help them see in the dark is kind of a good thing. So they see and taste with these little whiskers. They're called barbels.
I was going to ask you that question, actually.
Yeah.
They're not actually whiskers.
No, they're not actually whiskers. They're just sensory organs in a way.
Okay.
And they can so it helps them when, in low light conditions. They're sort of specialized for that.
All right. So they've got extra sensory, I don't know, are there practical applications for a catfish playing on a baseball team?
I was just going to say, if you are looking for how a catfish would be a great baseball player, it would be nice if you could sense the ball in other ways rather than seeing it. If sun gets in your eyes, there's not enough light, and I think that it really helps them to have sort of these super senses of a sort. Not only do they have these barbels, these whiskers they can sense things with, but they don't have scales. So
What?
Most catfish species don't have scales. What do scales do for fish?
That's how much they know how much they weigh.
That would be horrible. All right, I'm not going down that road. So most fish have scales that protect them. So imagine like you're a fish and you get poked with something and it's going to poke the scale first and it's hard. It's kind of like a suit of armor, right? For a fish.
Yeah.
So if you're a catfish, you don't have that. You need to have other protection. And so the barbels are sort of the out in front special protection force field sensory things.
Okay.
So it's kind of cool. So
That's kind of cool. So, but they don't have like armor, like
they don't.
Oh.
But the barbels, the whiskers are actually sort of out there sensing them, like bloop, 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 sensing their environment and protecting them from things that might hit them or harm them. So I think as a baseball player, that would be kind of a extra sensory thing to have. So there's sort of like a sensory bubble around them that can sort of tell when they should steal a base or not. I don't know. Extra sensory things would be helpful, I think.
Okay.
And they see better, and they also hear. They have sort of other ways to sense their environment. So they're seeing and tasting with their barbels, and their skin can actually taste. And some catfish could actually breathe through their skin rather than just their gills.
So if they were a Marvel superhero, they would be like Daredevil.
I think so.
Yeah, with all these extra senses.
Yeah.
How big can they get?
They can get up to 10 feet. But more impressive is how much they weigh.
Oh my gosh.
Some have been recorded up to 700 pounds.
Come on, get out of here.
No, I'm serious. Can you imagine that?
That's like the big panda.
Catfish was 700 pounds.
Where was that found?
That one was probably, I heard that they can get up to 700 pounds, but the largest is actually the Mekong River catfish.
The largest river in Southeast Asia.
I figured you would have a little bit of knowledge about that.
Listeners of this podcast will remember I was in Laos, right on the Mekong River. That was what a beautiful. I went for a run along the Mekong River.
I think it would be fun to have an alternate identity for a baseball team called the Mekong River Cats. Mekong River Cats.
The river catfish?
The Mekong River catfish.
All right. So 700 pounds is enormous. Why, if these fish get this big, are people fishing for them with their bare hands? Why are we fishing for catfish by sticking our bare hands under boats?
Why do people do anything, to get a thrill? Like, people are adrenaline junkies, right? And they're bored. I think that people who like to noodle, they like to go noodling, are, just adrenaline junkies. Well, and there's a certain amount of bragging rights that go along with that.
Could you catch a 700-pound fish with your bare hands?
I guess it depends on if you can lift 700 pounds with one hand. I don't think so. But some catfish can actually, one species can actually walk on land.
What?
Yeah, the Asian walking catfish actually can walk from one body of water to another. So that's kind of another superpower.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That means if they're walking a lot in baseball context, that just means they've got a real good eye.
Right.
That is good. That is, yeah,
So-
disciplined batters at the plate.
So does this team like to, do they walk a lot? They get walked a lot?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't have these stats on hand.
Maybe they're
They're just really like the Carolina Mudcats are just really patient hitters.
I love it. There are a lot of nicknames for Mudcats.
Oh, let's hear them.
Yeah. Okay. So Mudcats, Pollywogs came up, which to me sounds like tadpoles, but anyway, Mudcats, Pollywogs, Chuckleheads.
What?
I thought that was cute. Chuckleheads, big bullheads, shovelheads, scoopers, and flatties. And these to me just sound like a whole bunch of band names. Now I'm gonna just like my next band. I'm like, we're the Chuckleheads.
They all sound like insults to me.
They kind of do. Hey, Chucklehead.
Chuckleheads, big bullheads,
Yeah.
shovelheads,
Yeah, these-
scoopers, and flatties.
Yeah.
That's all terrible.
These are not, catfish are not like given the most respect.
Yeah.
Get no respect.
Yeah.
But they also have an organ called the Weberin apparatus.
Whoa.
Don't ask me to say that 3 times
No.
fast. That allows them to communicate with each other underwater. So they're one of the few fish that have this really cool organ that communicate. It makes a drumming sound.
Yeah.
And they can communicate with rubbing parts of their bodies together
Okay.
and making this sound. And so it's used for either sort of intimidating prey or signaling to a mate or a bunch of other things. So I'm thinking a baseball team that has sort of special ability to make sounds underwater that other species won't recognize.
Yeah.
Maybe they could be pitchers
Or
and
base
catchers,
coaches.
right? Oh, base
They could
coaches.
be, yeah, it's telling the runners, when to go and when not to go, and they can just be saying it in their secret drum language.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's, drumming is now illegal to do to tip people off.
Well, it's always been illegal. Let's not go down that road here. Let's,
But anyway, yeah, it would be a good thing for this team to have, I think, is a way to communicate in secret.
This experience that we had at the baseball game was a lot of fun. It was a really terrific logo. We've talked a lot on this podcast about how we're going to be sad if it goes away. If we're making a plea to the owners of the Carolina Mudcats when they move this team to Wilson, what's your argument for how come we should keep the Mudcats as the mascot for this team?
Well, I think catfish are cool. People anthropomorphize them so they can relate to them. They're a fun animal to have on our jersey or a t-shirt or whatever. But I think the team should keep them for economic reasons.
Tell me more.
Well, how much catfish got eaten that day when we went to the ballpark?
Man, that was a good catfish sandwich too. I mean, I'm no expert, but that was a good catfish sandwich.
I mean, and it probably wasn't cheap either. So, catfish is a huge, huge multi-million-dollar industry in this country. So if you take that away from this ballpark, I don't think that they're going to sell as many catfish sandwiches. So, put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Okay.
As you would say.
I do say that often. Ranger Amy Burnett can be found on the Twitters at Ranger Amy and on Instagram at The Real Ranger Amy.
That's right. This was fun.
Thanks, Ranger Amy. We'll see you next time. All right, everyone, welcome back. It's time once again for Studio Simon Stumpers with my very good friend Dan Simon of Studio Simon, designer extraordinaire, creator of so many great logos in the minor league baseball world. But right now, we're talking about a brand that is possibly not long for this world. It's possible that when the Carolina Mudcats move, not after this season, but after next season is how it seems like it's going to go down. Dan, I'm burying the lead here. Good morning. How are you?
I am fantastic. I'm actually looking forward to this. I look forward to all the Stumpers, but this episode, the Mudcats is one of the venerable minor league baseball identities.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, one of the very first minor league caps I got 30 years ago, probably before I started doing minor league identities, was a Carolina Mudcats hat.
Did you buy it? Did you buy it through the ad in the back of Baseball America?
You know what? I don't remember, too long ago. But I do remember the Carolina Mudcats. They still play, and hopefully, I hope what you just posited does not turn out to be the case, because they're, I don't want them to go away. It's
No,
one of the
it,
best baseball brands ever.
yeah, it's absolutely, you know, and we've talked about this on this podcast before. One of the logos that sort of signified a turning point in the culture of minor league baseball, where teams realized that they could have their own fun brands and benefit from it financially, and also, you know, give the community its own unique baseball team to root for. So I hope that when they move into their new ballpark, they keep that Mudcats brand. I'm not hopeful that that's going to be the case. So we'll see, obviously. But in the meantime, there's a lot that we could be talking about here with this Mudcats brand. So I'm anxious to see where you're going to go.
Here's where I'm going. I'm going with mud.
Oh, very nice.
Okay.
All right.
I
Mudville
think-
9, final answer.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that anytime you have the word mud in a name of a sports team, it's going to be a fun name, because mud is fun. Like, what little kid does not like playing in the mud? Let's talk about some other mud names. You just named one yourself, the Mudville 9, a brand identity I had the good fortune to be able to create. There is a team in the Collegiate Northwoods League, the Minnesota Mud Puppies. There was a team in an independent league called the Mount Rainier Professional Baseball League in 2014, 2015, the Oregon City Mud Turtles. There was another independent team in the Mid-America League, a league that only lasted 1 year, 1995, the Maryville Mud Dogs. That's in Indiana. The only professional sports team ever in the city of Maryville was the Mud Dogs, not to be confused with the Batavia Muck Dogs, the former New York Penn League team. One of my favorite of these names, in the Class D Kitty League in 1905 and 1906, the Cairo, not Egypt, but Illinois, Mud Wallopers. How is that for a name? The Cairo Mud Wallopers. And there is a team in the Kansas Collegiate League Baseball. It's not the Kansas Collegiate Baseball League. It's called Kansas Collegiate League Baseball for some reason that I don't have a good explanation for. The Valley Center Mud Daubers. And our studio Simon Stumper today is going to ask about mud daubers, and specifically, what is a mud dauber? Is it now this is a question for Ranger Amy. I would love to know if she would get this. So next time you see her, ask her this question. What is a mud dauber? Is it A, a bird? Is it B, an insect? Or is it C, a fish?
Each one of those, when you said bird, insect, fish, I said that one.
I just want to mention something. I had never heard of a mud dauber until I was doing my research for this question. But I was in my yard the other day. My next door neighbor was helping me with something. And I'll tell you about that after you answer the question, because I don't want to give it away. But like the day after I came up with this question, my next door neighbor mentions mud daubers. What are the odds of that happening?
That does seem unlikely. What a world we live in, though. It's like if your neighbor was Google Ads, you'd be suspicious that they were listening in on your phone or something. All right, I'm gonna say, if a mud dauber was a kind of bird, I'd have heard that from Ranger Amy by now. I'm going to say, because I haven't ever, to my recollection, heard Ranger Amy talk about mud daubers, probably not that. And so then it's down to the insect or the fish. And the only sussing that I can do is that if you were in your yard talking to a neighbor and mud daubers came up, that it might have had something to do with the immediate surroundings. which could have been your garden or your yard, or maybe some plant where you had to worry about certain kinds of insects. So I'm going to say not a bird because I feel like I'd have heard of it by now. And I'm going to say just tilting the coin flip very so slightly is the fact that you were talking to your neighbor in the yard. And so maybe that would have been an insect conversation. So I'm gonna use that to suss, and I'm gonna say B, insects.
Okay. And what if I told you my next door neighbor, by the way, he does not listen to this podcast, but should he ever, I'm going to shout out to my neighbor, Steve Kelly.
What's up, Steve Kelly?
What if I told you that Steve was an avid fisherman? Would you change your answer?
Maybe, but I feel like we're already too deep into the whole Steve Kelly situation anyway. So I'm gonna stick with insect because it was the one that I eliminated right away in my head, or at least it was the one that I eliminated first. And so I'm gonna do the whole reverse trusting my instincts thing today.
Okay. Well, Steve is not an avid fisherman as far as I know.
All right.
And you can't change your answer anyway.
Actually, Ranger Amy is just now showing up in the room here, and we do not know the answer to this question. So I'm going to give Ranger Amy the headphones, and you can ask Ranger Amy this question.
Hi, Dan.
Hello,
Oh, wait.
Ranger Amy. How are you?
Good. Good to see you, Dan.
Sorry for putting you on the spot, but when I asked Paul this question, I prefaced it by saying this is probably a question for Ranger Amy. So, and I asked him to ask you this question next time he saw you, and the next time he saw you was sooner than I expected. It's right now. So I'm going to ask you, what is a mud dauber?
It's a wasp. It's
Okay.
a kind of wasp that literally takes mud from the ground and uses it to make its nest.
Yes, yes.
They are
And
very painful. I have not experienced it, but seen lots of them.
Paul
Did he get it
answered
right?
correctly. He did not know what a mud dauber was, but he did answer correctly. So,
You didn't know what it was?
No.
Oh my goodness.
well, I had told
I will
Paul,
shame him in private later.
I had never heard of a mud dauber until the day after I wrote this question.
I thought you were going to
Okay,
say
so-
you didn't know it until you got stung by one. So I'm glad that didn't happen to you or your neighbor, hopefully.
But it could have happened because I'm going to tell Paul and our listeners why mud daubers even came up in conversation with my neighbor, Steve Kelly. So if you would be so kind as to give those headphones back
daubers
to
are such a
Paul, we're going to
nuisance.
invite the host of this podcast back into this
Sounds
stuff.
good. Yes. All right. Hold on.
I have
So-
retrieved the headphones.
The reason it came up is Steve helped me build the gate that goes across our driveway and separates the front of our driveway from the back of our driveway and our backyard. And he was helping me fix something on the gate that he helped me build. As a matter of fact, he didn't help me build it. I helped him build it. He's a master builder, craftsman, can do anything with tools and has every single tool you've ever heard of. As we were fixing the door to the gate that we had to fix, there was a wasp that I thought just happened to be in the yard, but it happened to have built its nest inside the door that we built. And he said, it's a mud dauber. And I had never heard of that, but I've seen their nests because they build them around my house. And I knew it was a wasp's nest, but I didn't know they were called mud daubers. I didn't even know that stuff was mud. I knew it looked like mud. I just thought it was some kind of something that they secrete or whatever, but it turns out it's mud. So yes, per Ranger Amy, a mud dauber is a wasp that builds its nest or their nests from mud. Now, the word dauber is spelled D-A-U-B-E-R. Here's another thing a dauber is. It's a bingo marker. Have you ever seen people playing bingo and they have this it's like a magic marker, but they press it down and it.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Okay, that is called a dauber. But then also you eliminated bird right away, but there is a bird called a dauber, D-O-B-B-E-R, which is an aquatic diving bird. And then there's also Pam Dauber, who played Mindy opposite Robin Williams in Mork and Mindy. Robin Williams played an alien named Mork from the planet Ork.
Yeah.
And Pam Dorber was and still is married to actor Tom Harmon, who was once part owner, believe it or not, of the San Bernardino Spirit minor league baseball team. And what are the San Bernardino Spirit today known as?
That would be the Inland Empire 66ers.
Correct. But now we have a Studio Simon Stumper sequel.
Okay.
Okay. In between being known as the San Bernardino Spirit and the Inland Empire 66ers of San Bernardino, they had another name. So what was the name they were known by between those two names? I don't have an A, B, and C choice for you. You either know it or you.
The San Bernardino, I don't know where I don't have any guesses except to say maybe they were just named for the parent club. They were the San Bernardino Angels.
They were the San Bernardino Stampede.
Of course, I should have known that. The Stampede. It was my favorite San Bernardino Spirit fact is that the famous Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card, that's sort of a close-up of him wearing Mariners stuff, is actually a photo of him from when he was with the San Bernardino Spirit. And they airbrushed, this was before Photoshop, they airbrushed Mariners stuff onto him. And so that famous photo is actually manipulated.
I believe Ken Griffey Jr. was 17 years old when he played for the Spirit. Because I do know he then later played or prior to playing for the Spirit, I don't know if it was prior to or after, he played for the Bellingham Mariners.
Yeah.
I have a friend who grew up in Bellingham, and I did the brand identity for the Bellingham Bells Collegiate Summer League team. So I know he played in the minor leagues when he was 18, and I believe 17 when he played for the Spirit, and made his major league debut at the age of 19.
Crazy.
19 years old. Can you imagine? Baseball's a hard game, and he was, 2 years out of high school and playing and doing well in the major leagues.
If he had stayed healthy, he might be the greatest of all time. He was. It was a shame that he couldn't stay healthy later on in his career, but
like Mike Trout.
Like Mike Trout, you know who has stayed healthy is Dan Simon and his Studio Simon Stumper streak that we have going here. Dan, Thank you very much. Keep posting fun stuff to Instagram at studio_Simon. And of course, Dan's work can be found at studiosimon.net. Dan, we'll see you next week.
I will see you then. Looking forward to it.